Hi everyone, welcome to the webinar about Is Your Staff Ready for Cloud Computing? We'll be led by Ian Moyse, Sales Director at Workbooks, and he has extensive experience in helping clients leverage cloud solutions. My name is CJ Best, I'm the Product Manager for Cloud at ITpreneurs, and we're running today's webinar for ITpreneurs and Global Knowledge.
So I'm not going to read through everything on every slide, some busy slides to get the messaging across. I've been in IT a long time and have a strong background. I sit on a number of organizations in the cloud, and really what I'm going to talk about is not theory, it's just what I've heard from people like yourselves listening, in working with customers, attending a lot of these things, living and breathing this new cloud environment. So hopefully give you some feedback and real world experiences and commentary. So there's a lot of confusion going on out there and an awful lot of hype, and I guess these cartoons illustrate some of the things you may have heard and seen. That cloud, the challenge is cloud is such a generic term, it means sort of everything to everyone. So hopefully we'll get past that, and what I'm going to cover here on the agenda, you can see some of the things that impact you, your people, and what you can do about that moving forwards. So the impact of cloud on an organization. So one of the biggest challenges is change, and I see a lot of people, when the word cloud's mentioned, reacting like the guy in the picture. I just want to hear, I've heard too much about it, don't really understand exactly where it fits, I haven't got time right now, etc. And change isn't always easy, and we'll come on to that in a second. So I just want to take you through very quickly what I think positions what's happening in our IT world. If you look at other industries, such as movies, for example, and videos, we've seen a shift of the form factor of how we digest that medium. We used to get movies in a videotape, we then moved to getting them through the post, and we now get them online, and we can stream them using things like Netflix, LoveFilm. So we get the same end result as a user to watch or own a movie, but the way it's delivered and the approach we take is very, very different, and we've adapted to that very quickly. And you'll see where I'm going with these very quickly. So same with music. We've seen the traditional music stores either going out of business or struggling in the fact that people have moved to online music, more flexible, easier, more cost effective. It's just the end result is the same. You get the music, you listen and own, but you don't digest it or access it in the same way. The same's happened in the book environment, as we're aware. You either buy books online or electronically. We can then move into the photographic world, where we've seen major brand name organizations such as Kodak vanish from existence. Who prints photos anymore? You tend to print selectively, but most of them are stored electronically. And the same in the postal world. We've seen card shops and online card shops, electronic cards, and a different way to serve the purpose, which leads me through to the IT industry and where we are today, in that some of you may remember, top left, the 5¼ floppy disk. A lot of people don't even recognize this anymore. That's how quickly things have moved. But we've shifted in the cloud world across different form factors, and that's what's happened in other industries. So cloud just gives you an option. It gives you a different form factor, a different delivery mechanism for solving a problem that already exists, rather than doing it with an appliance or on network software. So it doesn't replace, but it definitely gives you options that weren't available before. Now, one of the challenges I consistently see with this, and it varies in the nature of the size of company and the type of role, and where people have had experience, but in general there is a lack of understanding of the cloud and everything falls underneath it, and a lot of people are concerned around it and think it's just hype. So I think that's the first thing that we need to reference during this presentation. Second is, a lot of IT people are very concerned about cloud in terms of what effects it can have on their job. If I'm not installing a bit of software on a bit of hardware, configuring it, maintaining it, updating it, putting some security around it, if I'm not doing all these touchy things, do I still have a role? What's my purpose in this organization? And I'll come on and touch on that as well. And for users, there's still a lot of confusion about cloud. And the terminology hasn't helped, which I'll come on to in a second. What we also have is a lot of vendors who have spent an incredible amount of money building internet and cloud-based solutions. I would argue more has been spent today on building them than has been spent on buying them, and positioning very heavily to customers, you've got to go to the cloud. Everything should be in the cloud now as quickly as you can get there. And I would argue, being a cloud advocate myself and having lived this world for the last 8 years, that that's not the reality of the world that we live in. what cloud gives you is an option. It doesn't fix every problem. It is not right for every business in every scenario. It just gives you something where at the right time in the right place there's now a new option for you to select. Now, one of the challenges it's brought upon customers, businesses, their staff and individuals, and the industry itself, in effect, is the speed that this has happened and the speed of the hype and the speed of change and solutions that have come to market. It's been incredibly quick if we look at how the market has shifted previously. And I'll touch on that in a few slides' time, but that's something that users have to adopt to. So what we're saying is, you need to learn about this new stuff called cloud and all the relative components of it. You need to adapt to rapid change. Now, if you think about real world, how comfortable are individuals to change and to having to learn new things? Typically, people like the status quo. So that's one of the big challenges about this cloud piece, is that it does feel painful. Now, the slide I'm illustrating here, the reason for choosing this, is if you think back to when the motor car first appeared. This would have been a common scene. The cars would do 4 to 5 miles an hour, and there would be a man walking down the road in front of them with a red flag warning of danger. And people would look at them, calling them the devil's work, and they would never get in a car, they're too dangerous. You know, cars were there opposing the de facto, which was the horse and car, or the horse or walking as transport. Today we don't think or take a blink about being in a car. We take for granted that form factor. The same very much is where I see cloud today, that a lot of people are looking at this and being fearful, not understanding it. It's something new, not quite sure what it is, therefore I'm fearful of it, and I'm not sure whether I'm going to jump into this. So one of the things is we've got to accommodate both in the organisational change and in the people and individuals involved is the whole fact of change, is the whole fact of what you've been trained to do, educated to do, what you're experienced in, still has value, but things are going to change around you, and we need you to adapt and understand that. Now, if you look at the adoption of cloud, this references the Cloud Industry Forum, does regular surveys which you can go and download off their website freely, and I'll reference that at the end of the presentation. But one of the extracts from a recent study just showed the number of companies and percentage of companies as a sample using cloud today, and it's pretty uniform, split across private and public sector companies, small and large companies. So the adoption is growing and it is taking place, and what we're typically finding is customers are having one, or perhaps it's their first cloud service or perhaps their second, but we are seeing a growth of adoption. The big bold statement around this though is that cloud is incredibly disruptive, as we've seen in those other markets and sectors that I covered a few seconds ago, where technology and brand names like Blockbuster and Tower Records, for example, in the video and music industries, have been totally disrupted by new entrants, new brands, new form factor delivery methods. We're going to see, and we are seeing the same in the information technology world. So how are the various roles going to change? And certainly in IT, I think that there's an overhype that everything will be replaced, and the way we do things today, PCs, etc., will be gone within seconds. Certainly there is going to be change, and IT function has got to adapt to that. IT is where the core of this will start, for sure. And there are plenty of examples out there. This is one I pulled off the internet. There's a public example where an organisation, in this case an event marketing company called Momentum Worldwide, were going to move things in certain parts of the business into the cloud, and IT were totally concerned about their jobs, what they're going to do now, why do you need us? And that's a common reaction, and that's something that you need to be aware of and conscious of in moving cloud into your business. But it is also going to affect other areas of the business. It's not just the IT department, and I'll touch on that in a second or two. If we look at the areas where cloud's being adopted today, and of course this will grow as people become more comfortable with the delivery method, but traditionally it started really around email security and storage. So filtering your email in the cloud, taking out spam and viruses, putting security into the cloud because that's where a lot of the threats come from, and doing backups and storing files in the cloud. So those common things that are obvious solutions that lend themselves to being at the internet level. What we've then started to see is a number of business applications such as ERP, customer relationship management, which is where I now work with workbooks as a cloud vendor, and other business apps moving into the cloud. And we're going to start to see more and more applications being delivered across the internet. As you can see on the right here, the growth factors are expected to be large. So the cloud will touch all aspects of the business because of those applications. For example, in deploying a customer relationship management system in the cloud, it isn't just going to be the technical people that touch that technology. It is going to affect sales, finance, and different people who log into that system. It's going to mean they can do it on their mobile devices. It's going to mean they store things perhaps in a different way with files being attached, etc. And if you look at the different roles involved, there are a plethora of roles. There's some examples on this slide, but lots of business will have different types of roles, and the level of change in their role and the environment and what they need to know that will be impacted by cloud applications and cloud solutions will vary greatly. So this isn't a one-size-fits-all. This isn't everyone has to learn something totally new, but it is going to touch different parts of the organization at different times in different ways. Now, one of the things that is a positive that I think can help the adoption and the receptiveness of employees is when you look at statistics like this. The cloud is already reported to be growing the employment sector. There's a lot more jobs requesting cloud skills and cloud competencies. A few examples are on this slide here that I've taken. There's been more I've seen in the past week, and there's a lot of predictions about the number of jobs that cloud will create, and also the jobs that are asking for cloud-based skills. So I think that illustrates, whilst there may be a potential worry within people, there is always a positive flip side to this. So what we're illustrating on the next three slides is just examples of how roles may change. So for example, if you're going for private cloud, non-premise virtualized deployment, if you look at those highlighted in orange here, there's going to be some new technical training and some new skills needed for these people, some upskilling to be able to know how to deploy correctly a virtualized environment from the way they've typically deployed on-network solutions previously. So in that scenario, there's a skills enhancement. If you move to enterprise cloud, public cloud, we will see an enhancement of skills in some areas. We will see some roles that potentially will cease to exist, which means people reskilling or perhaps not having as many of that resource in the business, unfortunately. And there'll also be some new roles. Here an illustrated as an example of a cloud broker. There may be a growth in managers of service level agreements and service level management in the business to manage those relationships with cloud providers. And thirdly here, public cloud in doing development and test environments. So if you're looking at infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, there will be new skills involved in, instead of putting the hardware or the operating system on your own site, in running those up virtualized over the internet and then deploying and re-architecting your own applications to run in that environment. So there's a plethora of different ways to address cloud, as there are a number of different platforms in the cloud. What it certainly will do, though, if you look at here a simple example, and a humorous example, hopefully, of things are going to change. How we adapt and how we solve problems is going to change. And some of that means how roles and how people work and what their skill sets are used for will change as well. So how do you do to adapt to that inside business? Well, one of the challenges I've seen with organizations is typically a lot of what happens is ad hoc and tactical. There's not a thought through cloud strategy in the business of how are we going to approach cloud as we go into different projects, not just in the next couple of months, but over the next several years, as we come into new technology product projects, as we come to refresh projects. Where does cloud fit? How are we going to appraise whether cloud is the right approach for us? How risk averse or not are we in the business? What data do we not want to leave outside the business? Do we want private or public cloud? So it's going through that strategizing prior to getting into a project and then rushing to buy something and make a decision. And if we look at the evolution of computing in real simple terms, we've moved from the centralized computing of the mainframe era in the 60s, 70s, to distributed computing of the PCs in the 70s, 80s, coming into the 90s, moving into client-server, much more web services over the past few years, and now more into a cloud environment where we can truly do switch it on in the cloud, whether it be the application, the hardware, or a mix of with the operating system, so infrastructure, platform, or software as a service. But if you think about this, that has been firstly an evolution and a change that people have gone through previously of skill set and use in the business. But also, these technologies haven't just replaced each other, they've complemented. We have today people using PCs in a client-server environment, still accessing web services, maybe a bit of cloud already, and somewhere in the background, often there's still a mainframe acting for a proprietary legacy application. So this isn't a case of scrub everything and all the skills and resources in the past. This is, you now have this extra option to choose in an appropriate time and fashion. One of the challenges of this adoption phase I've seen and experienced, I was presenting at an event in London on Friday last with 100 people, and a very good feedback afterwards because all I like to do is talk pragmatically about the realities of the world. And one of the realities is cloud has been incredibly hyped as a very generic solution. So underneath cloud you have private cloud, public cloud, hybrid cloud, software as a service, platform as a service, communications as a service, infrastructure, and I could go on. And that's one of the challenges, that we've made this overcomplicated, that people either hear the cloud term or they hear very technical terms and there's never anything in between explaining what the reality is, what this delivers for the business. And yet when we look at why people are adopting cloud-based solutions, it certainly isn't because it's called cloud. It's not because it's some whizzy technology. It's for the end outcome for the business. And if you look at them, there's a number of reasons. Typically it's easier to manage and deploy. So it's something that's easier to change to and switch on very quickly. But there's a wide range of reasons in terms of flexibility, mobile user support, which I'll touch on in a second, more predictable cost. There isn't one thing that stands out for every customer. And one of the things I always emphasize to people is, you've got to understand people are change averse. They do things the way they do them because it's a habit, and it is difficult to change. Even if in our home lives, if we change our car or our television, there's a level of discomfort that things aren't where they were before, and you're not sure how the stereo works or how the television remote works or how to do this. I used to know how it worked. That button doesn't do what I thought it would do. And that's very much the same in business with cloud, that it's seen as disruptive and change. And this is a cartoon I'm sure many of you, if not all, have seen before, which I think illustrates it well, is a lot of people will turn their backs on it because I not really understand what that thing you've got there is, and I'm too busy fighting this battle. We've got to slow people down, be pragmatic about understanding that cloud does have its benefits when used at the right time and right place. It can be incredibly positive for a business and for the user experience, but we've got to open our eyes up and consider it. So some of the areas where, when's the right times to consider, when might you be considering cloud as a change in the business? And some of the areas here, I'm not going to read through everything on this busy slide, but if you're doing a refresh of a particular application, that's a good time to appraise, is there a new, more effective way of doing this? Or are we doing it the best we can because perhaps this application is coded for us and there's nothing else on the market available that's going to be able to deliver this? In which case you might look, can we virtualize it and get more processing and efficiency out of the hardware? Do you have demands from users on mobility? Do you have multiple offices? Are you doing the best you could do in resilience and security for the application? Is it an application that is best managed in the cloud, perhaps like an email server, where you don't really want to be maintaining, patching and securing it, and there are the more important things in the business your own resources could be addressing. Now, a big win for users in cloud, and very heavily tied to cloud, I think, is this term of consumerization and bring your own device. If you look at these on the screen, I'm sure all of those on the call get their email to more than one device today, often 2 or 3 devices. Users are being far more demanding on the business for, I want to be able to move and work flexibly from remote locations, be it home or on the move. I want to be able to access my email, my applications, my information, which, if delivered, can be extremely more productive for the business, that you're getting more out of those workers. But historically, that's been a difficult thing to do across different platforms. How do you deliver it securely? How do you do the authentication, the VPN connection, the network connection? All those things with cloud are handled for you by the nature of what cloud delivers, that it's internet-based. And many, if not all, cloud applications will already deliver a client application for mobile devices. So it isn't just a web browser, it adapts itself and gives either a mobile app or a mobile rendered version to make the user experience as it should be on that device. For IT, do they really want to be doing this? Do you really want to be running and managing infrastructure, plug and playing with very complex systems, or do you want to be focused on the more interesting stuff, the more interesting and more important delivery to the business? You know, a lot of IT time and resources spent just keeping systems up and running, break fix, updating, patching, maintenance, cabling, all this sort of stuff, which isn't highly valuable to the business. It's a necessity, but it's something you would choose not to do ideally. The real business value from IT support and services comes from the customization, the aligning it with true business requirements. And finally, for the business, a simple example is security and resilience. Cloud being run for you is going to be far more effective in terms of security and resilience, that those providers are delivering protection and infrastructure to far greater clients. If you're serving thousands of clients, you have a greater responsibility to deliver uptime and reliability. And it's also far greater use of the resources. So a cloud provider will typically spend millions building a data center and infrastructure and resilience to serve you as a customer. If you as a customer wouldn't be spending that much yourself, you'll be spending a subsection of that to deliver that level of reliability. You're not going to achieve the same level of quality. Now the vendor can afford to do that because they're sharing those costs across multi-tenancy clients. So it's not just you paying for it. So for example, if you're a 300 user client and there's 10 of you at that size trying to build your own systems, you're all typically investing in components, implementation, everything to get to that point. Whereas the cloud provider only has to do it once combined for all of you. Now when we look at, and this is often good things to share with people in the business, and as I said, I would suggest downloading some of these studies which have all the independent stats and results behind them. But here, looking at cloud companies, companies that have adopted cloud, in general, the satisfaction level and of quality delivered is incredibly high. And there's been an increase over the past 18 months of companies adopting cloud. And that's a trend we are seeing growing. Particularly customers that have already deployed and used one cloud application, we're finding are far more receptive to their second and third because of the positive experience they've had. So what can you do to address the cloud competency gaps? Well, you need to look at the different people in the business involved at the relevant time, which I'll come into in a second, and understand what skill level do they need in cloud. So for example, if it's someone that's going to be architecting cloud solutions internally on a private cloud, do they have the skill levels today to deploy, plan, architect, install and manage those virtualized environments? And that might be vendor certification and training, it might be generic technical training on platforms or on cloud itself. But you need to understand what those differences are, what skills they should have and are going to need, and help skill them up to those levels. And there are many, and you'll find on cloud, because of the nature of the growth in the market, there's a lot of technology training available on this. For example, a strong one which I personally took through and certified in was the CompTIA Cloud Essentials certification. And that's really ideal for a fundamental cloud education level of when to use and what to use and when for people right across the business. So it's in the technology implement a vendor-specific education. It's very generic value to everyone in the business. What you need to look at is what cloud initiatives do you have, and skill up appropriately to them as and when you're deploying them. And this is where having a planning strategy around cloud deployment ahead of time is going to be useful, that you can start to skill people up now which will show investment in those people in the business, which will make them feel more comfortable about cloud because they're involved rather than reacting. They're proactively being trained and their value is being incremented to the company and to themselves. And you've got to train them at the right time. There's no point training the users up before systems are deployed. So it's really about training the relevant people at the right time in the right skills. And again, that needs planning and forethought. Now, a couple of examples here. What might you train people in? So, for example, why would financial people need to know anything? Well, they need to be looking at the tax implications of cloud. You know, whether or not this is an OPEX or CAPEX cost, how you measure the return on investment, perhaps how you work on the actual SLA paybacks from vendors, and how you manage those contracts. And that can also involve the legal team, of course. The ops manager, it's not just about managing the cloud application, it's about provisioning it. How do you provision users in that system? How do you meter the billing? How do you pay for this? Is it on a usage basis? Is it subscription management? And what is best for your business? What's available and what would be the best choice for the business? So there's some things in investment in time and execution that your employees need to take part in. Now, I think it's important to make sure that you work with staff and get focused on the reality and not the marketing hype that's gone on in the market. Cloud is being positioned, unfortunately, as the solution to everything. It's being positioned as you should buy it now and replace everything you've got with cloud-based solutions. And there's a lot of mentioning of cloud from people who don't really understand, unfortunately, when they're talking to you, exactly what they're talking about. It needs to be a balanced approach. So the advice and guidance I think is a good structured way to approach is, firstly, education is absolutely key. You need to take part in educating not only yourself but your staff, the technical people, whether it be on technical certifications that could be from vendors like Microsoft, VMware and the like, or whether it be in terms of business training on what is the cloud and where is it going to fit and affect us over the years in something like the CompTIA training. You need to be receptive to change. Change is always uncomfortable for anyone in personal or private life, but there's no doubt in the IT world change is upon us. You know, if you look at, we're now using mobile devices, whereas years ago most people didn't even have a mobile phone, let alone accessing internet on the move. We need to stay away from getting caught up in the hype and the terminology. A lot of this is being talked around technology and making to be very complex. You can bring this back to pretty much the basics and fundamentals of mapping out in your business which applications would suit cloud usage and which would not, and which would be where you would change your application to be a cloud-based application, either moving to the same vendor who maybe has a cloud version, or changing totally the application used to a new vendor, or where you maybe have your own applications where you can move them into a cloud-based environment by either virtualization as a private cloud or putting them up onto infrastructure or platform as a service and getting benefits from doing that. I'd advise that you do have a planned cloud strategy, that you think ahead now and not wait until you're evaluating each individual component tactically. Start to plan out what can we do about the cloud, what's our opinion in the business, what skills do we need to get now. And I'd emphasize that there's certainly, you know, for people who understand the cloud, I've experienced this myself, but accidentally falling into this environment a number of years ago, a great deal of opportunities have opened up to me, and also to people I know because of them understanding and working in the cloud environment, and there being a shortage of people, whether they be business leaders, whether they be people working in the legal sector and in the cloud sector. There's a lot of people now specializing in this and getting great benefit personally. Now, some good reference points. There's a couple of examples here, and there's a lot on the internet, but I've mentioned some studies and resources. If you look at the site at the top, the Cloud Industry Forum, there's now 8 white paper studies, including what to do about advice on looking at cloud contracts with vendors. They're all downloadable for free, and they're all vendor agnostic, so there's nothing in there biased towards a particular technology or vendor. They're done from an independent standpoint. There's CompTIA Cloud Essentials I mentioned, and I'd recommend taking a look at that course, which is an online computer-based training with a formal exam that you go to a local testing centre to sit. And a couple of books that I personally think are good from two sides. One is more technical and one is more business generic. The Cloud Computing Assessing the Risks came out a number of months ago, and that really talks in depth about looking at risk management, change management and security in the business. So a great one for those technologists to really become more expert and read up on the things they need to consider. And the generic one I think is a great book to read. It's been out for a number of years now, called The Big Switch by Nicholas Carr. Talks very much like I started at the beginning of this short session around other industries changing, and then allays them to why in our sector we're moving towards a different way of delivering IT power and IT usage. It's a good read, it's not technical, and it really is something for business leaders to understand and get on the right page of why this is happening. Now, I've run quick. We started slightly late with apologies, but I've run slightly quick and we're running ahead, so it does give time for some questions. So I'll ask CJ if there's any questions that have come through.
Hey, thanks, Ian. I mean, really enjoying the presentation so far. I mean, you keep it light, some good tips, some good structure as well, and yeah, also love some of the examples you've used. So thanks so far. We do have a couple questions. One here is from Ben, and he asks, I'll just read out the question here. It says, cloud security is a big concern for me and my company. Do you have any comments on this, and what should I do to remove these fears?
Sure. Okay. So I'm not going to lay it's cloud security is the number one concern that comes out in all studies about the cloud. I think part of that is absolutely valid, and part of it is because of the hype around this. If you don't understand something, of course, there's going to be nervousness. And usually the studies that come out, certainly the Cloud Industry Forum I mentioned, if you download those, they'll show the level of detail. That's one of the studies they did, are around data security and data privacy. Where's my data and who can access it? So, it's a valid concern, but I would argue it's a valid concern in using in-house solutions. How do you secure things? How secure is something if I put a database on the network? Could someone hack in? Could someone on the network get access to it? So it's not a new concern. It's just some different questions that come up around because it's being hosted by someone else. What I'd advise is absolutely due diligence on this, and it's absolutely within your right to ask all of the relevant questions you'd expect to ask of that cloud provider. So I would suggest those at high level be, where are your data centers located? Where will my data be? Will it be on the data centers you've just cited to me? Who has access to that data and where are they located? And which data laws apply? So depending I'm not sure where Ben's located, but depending where you're located, which data laws apply? So if I'm in the US and my data is being hosted in the US, is it all US laws apply? Because the vendor might be a foreign vendor, for example. So what laws apply? So it's pretty basic questions, but what you'll find is they quite often flush out the good, the weak from the chaff, so to speak. So certain vendors won't be able to answer those questions well. I think what you'll find by engaging with a cloud vendor, the reputable ones will be very open with those answers. For example, we at Workbooks are very open with, and on our website in fact, how we store data, who can access, but also how you get your data back, which is also a good question to ask. If I want to leave your service, how easy, and is it in my control, and is there any cost to exiting? Data liberation, we call it. So it's all about asking questions of the vendors and seeing how open and how good the answers you get are. And there's plenty of research information on the web to help those questions if you haven't asked them before. What I would emphasize is the cloud in general is a very secure environment. There will always be exceptions, but that's the case in any world, whether it be car safety. Some cars are more safe than others. It doesn't stop us using them. So I would advise, don't discount the cloud because of concerns, but do your diligence absolutely.
Thanks, Ian. I'm just wondering if I should ask the other question too, then because we have some more, and it seems like we can fill the whole webinar with questions. But just let's pick a couple more.
Okay.
One here is from somebody who says, Ian, your experience in your experience, where are you seeing cloud adopted? That's a question from Alyssa.
So right across the industry, there's no common sector or business type that's adopting it. It's big companies, small companies. It's different vertical sectors and public and private sectors. Where I think it can give the most benefit consistently is the smaller to medium-sized business. Because if we look back how IT was originally, there would be very different solutions used by big companies to small companies. Because the bigger companies could afford large vendor brand name solutions which needed a lot of infrastructure and database and technology to set up. But they could afford that because the scale was they were putting thousands of users on the system. If you took one of those old legacy systems and said, well, we want to apply that to a 55 user business, typically the cost of setup, the cost of getting going was just expansive. So it was out of reach of that small business. So the smaller company would choose a different platform or solution. What cloud has done is leveled that. It means that the small business can choose to use the same technologies as the huge corporation, but pay the appropriate cost and price to their business. Because they're just, in effect, using 55 users of the same system as opposed to 55,000 users, so you pay appropriately rather than have to put a box in. You're sharing the resource and the platforms in the cloud environment. So I think the big benefit is that smaller companies now have far more flexibility and options available to them to compete much more flexibly with larger brands. And that's happening in the IT sector. If you think about it, there are a lot of cloud providers, us included at Workbooks, who are beating some big names because we can now. Because we can act much more effectively as a business and operate more effectively in the cloud and reach more customers. We can act and sell to customers worldwide without having to operate and set offices up in every location because the internet gives us that capability. So I think it just gives more freedom of choice and more flexibility across the board. And I think that's the big difference we've seen with cloud as opposed to it being adopted in certain sectors or sizes of business.
Okay, so flexibility is key then.
Sure, yeah. I think that's one of the key things. You think about mobile users, cloud makes that real easy.
Yeah.
You can access those applications on the move very quickly and easily without having to worry about how do I make that even work in our business.
Yeah, it makes me think about like the trend bring your own device, where it's great for the productivity, increasing productivity within staff, but on the other hand, it's very hard for IT to manage that, and everybody just expects seamless integration. But I guess that's another story.
It is, and I think, but I think you made a good example there, CJ, because think about that. It solves one problem that would have been very technically challenging for IT to deliver before, is access to all these different platforms and devices. But it raises another one but you have to secure and have access control for these devices. So it says to IT people, you may not be doing something you did before, but there's now a new thing for you to do. You need to solve this problem. So it just changes what IT's responsibilities and requirements are.
Yep, very true. Hey, considering the time, I think we'll do one more question, and I think a nice one to close the webinar off with is from Chris. I think he has a good question. It's what is the biggest challenge or thing you've noted from experience in the cloud?
That's an intro. The biggest thing I think I've seen is the speed of change in the industry and the impact and the speed of value and it can give to a business. Historically, if a business was going to go through a change of an application or put something new in, it could be an incredibly long time before the user ever got to touch it. Whereas today, you can turn a software as a service application on, for example, and relatively, depending on what it is, have users up and running the same, if not next day, and accessing that system. So, and at a price that's far more affordable than before. So the speed of which you can spin something up, whether it be an infrastructure as a service, you can have a server up and running in seconds, or an operating system loading onto it, etc. I remember days previous where you would hear planning and it would be a month before the kit arrived, and then it would be another 2 or 3 weeks before that was plugged up and scheduled in, and it could be 2 or 3 months before someone can even see what you've spent your money on. Now, the speed to result is far quicker. And I think that's the world we're now living in. You look at devices like mobile devices, the speed of change and enhancement that we've gone through from, what we were having a basic mobile phone to incredibly smart, powerful phones these days. Everything is moving quicker. So I think that's the biggest thing I've seen. And I think cloud and mobile devices linked together are two of the things driving that. There's incredible demand from users on, I want flexibility, I want mobility, and I want it now. And an incredible benefit to the business and IT and the ability to deliver solutions quickly because of this form factor.
Mm. So would you say then that when the question was related to what is the challenge, right, when selling cloud, is that
Sure.
you can turn it around into a benefit and saying, well, cloud makes you much more quickly to adapt and much more agile?
It does, but I would not rush people through the decision process because of that. They've still got to be comfortable, making the decision to go to this cloud thing because it is such a generic term.
Yep.
So what does it really mean? B, I don't really understand it. There's a lot I don't know about it, which is typically what comes from people. There is a level of discomfort, so I think there's got to be a pragmatic approach of it's an educational sale. It's a working with the customer, and it is very much a solutions type approach, not as we're seeing unfortunately many position. You should go cloud. It's the bee's knees. It's fantastic. It's going to solve all your problems, and it's cheaper. So you should go it. That's not good for the customer to hear. What the customer needs to understand is what is the end outcome I'm going to get. Is it more flexibility? Apologies. Is it that I can get this application up and running that I need quickly, or this operating system? Whereas if I do it the old way, it could take me 3 weeks, and I could have this quicker and faster. Whatever it is that the customer's outcome wants to be, what is it you want to achieve? Is it reduced cost, more efficiency for staff, better flexibility for mobile workers? Does cloud enable me to achieve that outcome? And if it does, and does it better than a previous type of solution, then I'd suggest, well, that's probably a good thing to look at.
Yeah.
But not just because of the hype that's in the market.
A very good point. Thanks, Ian, for answering the questions, providing the webinar. We still managed to close off in time, so thanks for that. Much appreciated. Also, much appreciated for our audience here and participating. And look forward to seeing you during the next webinars on cloud with global knowledge and ITpreneurs.